Hi, this is going to be a video showcase for the Occult Mage build that I've been playing in Wolcen for the past 2 weeks or so. I feel like it doesn't use any mechanics that are likely to get nerfed anytime soon, so it should be viable until, say, they release an expansion or a giant content patch or something in the far future. So this video guide should stand for a while, and it has a bunch of moving parts, but a strong core concept, so you can adjust it to fit your own personal play style. But the build itself should remain um, viable for as long as you want it to be. I'm going to split this up into 3 separate videos. So the first one is going to be on the skills and the passive tree. The second one is going to be on the gearing. And the third one is just going to be a quick untainted run. So let's get right into the skills here. Don't want to use up too much of your time. I know a lot of Wolcen build videos end up like very, very long. So the quick skills are Infinity Blade, Bulwark of Dawn, Solar Fall, Anomaly. I'm using Lightbringer. The fifth spell is optional. When you're leveling up, you're not going to have a fifth spell. And when you do get to the fifth spell, there's plenty of other options. I have a write-up for it that I put on Wolcen Universe about a week ago. I'll link that in the description below. But this is my personal favorite that I've been using right now. And Aether Jump is going to be your mobility spell that you're going to be using. You're going to put on the right click and just jump around with it. So why I'm picking these is they're all occult damage, other than Aether Jump that you can make it occult damage, but basically it's just a mobility spell. All of these are occult damage. We're scaling occult damage as much as we can, hence the Occult Mage, and they all sort of build off of each other and create like a giant pool of like AoE damage on the ground. And all of this damage is occult damage, all of it's AoE, all of it scales with the same stuff. So, Infinity Blades. This is what I'm currently running for it. When you're starting off, what you're going to want to run is this. You're going to need to convert it into shadow damage when you don't have enough flat shadow damage on your gear so that you're applying cursed on everything. Um, this is going to be your only source of shadow damage until you get it on your gear, and it's very important to apply curse stacks. So I would make sure to take this until you can safely take it off and still have your curse show up there. We're going to take both the willpower things here. This is good when you're in packs. It'll fill up your willpower bar, and this is good against bosses and just in general. You'll be critting a lot. Getting your willpower back, it makes you spammable against bosses. You just sit there and hold the button, and you'll be good to go. Anti-ability form, this is what Bleeding Edge used to have, except it was bugged. In Bleeding Edge, it was like 50% increased damage per stack, and they've since reduced it to a reasonable thing. This one is like, it has always been a reasonable thing. They didn't have to roll it back. But we're scaling ailment stacks because we need to hit max curse stacks to improve occult damage, so this is going to add a bunch of damage. Reading Aquatic Memories is a big one because one of the best ways to scale your damage in Wolcen is flat damage bonuses, such as gems. You have flat damage to spells, and this applies flat damage bonus just to everything, to you and nearby allies, so it's nice if you're playing a party. But let me show you. So we currently deal 5,719. Press it once. This buff lasts for a while. 6,862. So that is a huge increase. And the reason that it is because flat damage in Wolcen is what is being multiplied by all your bonuses, as opposed to just like a bonus of increased damage. If you'll see, I go from 5,719 5,766. Flat damage, flat like percentage increase is not going to give you much, but actual flat damage numbers will. So you want to scale that as much as you can. And finally, we have Material Sinkhole, which applies a debuff. In ARPGs, typically the best way to scale your damage is to increase the damage that enemies take by reducing their resistances or applying debuffs. So, assuming this works, and the whole build is just assuming that everything is working properly and isn't dealing too much, isn't dealing too less, etc. This should be increasing all of your damage by a sizable margin. If you don't like the melee playstyle, and I personally love the melee playstyle in ARPGs, but I know a lot of people don't, you can take Annihilation and just make sure to take Toxic Entropy, which is the same as the static buff that Infinity Blaze gives. It'll give you the same amount of damage. So just take that and then take whatever else you want. I haven't played with it too much, but because it has this and because it's an AoE range spell, you could just put all of your stuff in a pile and then sit there and throw Annihilation at them. So if you want to play range, that's the way. The only thing is Annihilation doesn't have this, which is the debuff. So that's what you'd be giving up by not playing melee, but again, it's personal preference. You can do that if you want. Next is Bulwark of Dawn. This is a defensive spell that also happens to deal damage. So first we're going to increase the duration to 10 seconds. It starts at 5. You take both of these, it goes to 10. And then deals damage. They nerfed this recently, so it deals less damage, less ticks. But they might nerf it again to make it deal like 1 tick instead of 2. But what we're doing this is not for damage. It's just a bonus 1 point. This now deals damage. That is occult damage that scales with everything. It doesn't deal a lot of base damage, so like if I didn't have sacred damage on my gear, this would be applying like cursed and stasis or cursed and shock or whatever damage my gear was based on, because the base damage on the spell isn't that much, but it's just free damage basically. This one's optional. I'm just taking it because I have extra points. What you're usually going to have to take is reduced cooldown here. Between this, increasing the duration to 10 seconds, and this, reducing the cooldown. I have tons of cooldown reduction, but it'll reduce the cooldown to 10 seconds. You'll be able to have 100% uptime on this, so that's important. Excuse me. This one makes it so that it follows you. Normally, you'll just place it and it'll stay there, but if you have this, it'll move with you. And the final one I took is just a buff to all resistances. It's extremely small. If you'll see, my resistances go from 11,000 to 11,700, but it's 1 point. It's free, so I'd say it's worth taking. And because I have enough cooldown, I could unallocate this. I could take this. You can take whatever you want. I just like taking this. Next is Solar Fall, our hard hitter. This will do a preposterous amount of damage. You see it does 6,000. Nothing else does 6,000 that I have here. We're going to start off taking these two. Damage dealt by the area increases over time. This is going to make it scale from 6,000 to even more as it goes over time, which is what makes it hit so hard. And increases the tick rate, which is if you've played like any sort of video games before with damage over time effects, increasing the tick rate on a dot will increase the damage like tremendously, not exponentially, but like tremendously. It basically adds haste to it. Even if it like reduces the cooldown on the dot, you're still getting like way more ticks per second, which increases the DPS by a lot. I'm taking this. This is optional. You don't have to take this. I like taking this because if you just do it normally, that circle on the outside, that is your area of effect. You take this, circle's going to increase slowly as it goes, and when it gets the biggest is when it's fully ramped up. You'd also take this if you need more damage. Creates it over when dealing critical damage. It doesn't have any like visual effect, but it could just be because we have so much crap in this build that hard to see. But it's more damage, and it makes a nice F on the skill tree. Taking increased crit damage here because anytime you see crit damage, you want to take it. Crit damage is another way you can multiply your damage in Wolcen. So basically, flat damage and crit damage are the two big ones. You want to keep an eye out for those because they will multiply your damage. Sunrise is a game changer. Basically, when you're leveling up, the skill's a channeling. So it's going to do a ton of damage, but it's going to be a channel. It's going to use your willpower. You can't use anything else when casting it. When you take this, you can just use it, do whatever you want, cast other spells. Game changer. Another thing people don't know is you can still move it when it's static. So use it. All you have to do is move your cursor somewhere and hit the button again. You'll take 1 tick of the channeling willpower, and it'll move to wherever your cursor is. And then lastly, we take reduce the initial cast time, because if you don't take it, you're going to sit here for a Greek Age when you cast it. You do take it. Boom. Done. Easy. And we're not scaled for cast time here. Not very much cast time. Still not much cast time. So very important to take that one if you don't want to be sitting there every time you pull a pack for like 3 seconds. If you've seen an anomaly before, this is the standard anomaly setup. AoE. This increases the effect of the damaging vortex. If you see the little one in the center is the damaging, the big one is the pull-in. You take that, I gotta wait for this to be on cooldown. Now the whole thing is the damaging vortex. Um, areas of damage when they pulled in. If you see every time it pulses like that, it deals damage. You don't have to take this when leveling up because you won't have this. And if you don't have that, it's only gonna pulse once, and that's it. So not a lot of bang for your buck here, but when you get this, excellent combo here. Duration is just nice quality of life, keeps your purple sludge on the floor longer. 2 vortexes, this is great, because if you see, it's on cooldown, I can still cast it. So it's like having 2 charges, except when it comes off of cooldown, you instantly get both charges back, so you can just do it right away. Another cool thing is if you're struggling against unstoppable mobs, and this may or may not be a bug, but currently, if a mob is unstoppable, it can't be CC'd. But if you place 2 vortexes like this, it'll bounce between the 2 of them, and it'll effectively be CC'd even though it's immune to CC. So like I had one of those mobs where they summon clerics that heals it to full health, and they were unstoppable because the mods I got is like unstoppable, regen, tough. I was just like, oh Christ. I did that on the clerics, kept them CC'd the whole time, was able to outdamage the regen, boss is dead. So that's a fun thing you can do with the vortexes. And then crit damage, of course, you have to take crit damage if you see it. Lightbringer, we'll come back to this one because it's the 5th skill. It's sort of optional. So let me get to the final skill here. You're going to want, when you start off, to take this setup. March of the Time Devourers basically eliminates the cooldown. I believe the cooldown starts at around 10 seconds. And you're going to want to you don't want to take that. But it increases the willpower cost every time you use it. So if you've ever played like Kassadin in League of Legends, it's going to increase the willpower cost, like multiply it every time. So you want to take reductions to both of the flat ones. I have a lot of reduction on my gear and in my tree, but you want to take the reduction on the flat ones because it's the flat cost that is being multiplied each time. And then you also want to take cooldown because the cooldown is going to affect when the cost resets. So even though it doesn't have a cooldown, the reduced cooldown will still benefit it. And then I like taking Time Paradox. I know there's some enemies that have stuns, they push you back. Doesn't work on the Untainted mobs that like catch you in an animation, but there's some like Republican stuff that throws you back, and when they throw you back into like a couple seconds stun, what you do is just use a spell. You can use it when you're stunned, and as soon as you come out of the spell, you'll be unstunned, free to use whatever spells you want. So this is very nice for 1 point, especially because Sovereign Shadow takes 3 points to get the same effect. And then this is nice. I have some movement speed decreasing things right now, but when you're leveling, you won't have those, and it lasts for a very long time, and it's a pretty sizable increase to your movement speed. All right, last is the 5th spell. You won't have this one leveling up because you won't have unlocked it. You'll unlock it later in the game over here. But there's tons of stuff you can take here. You can take any of the staff skills, and when you get enough shadow damage, you can move this over to this, and then you can take any of the axe skills, any of the warrior skills you want. I've currently settled on this one, Lightbringer. It does occult damage, which is nice. It leaves area of ground. That's the first thing we're going to take, so it leaves little consecrated ground there. Inflict Bleeds and Shock. This is the reason I chose this over some of the other options, like Plague Burst and stuff. The Shock is 100% application, regardless of your damage that you have, like your flat damage. So like it applies weakness and stun, which does get affected by the damage, but like if I take this off, it's weakness and cursed, but it's still gonna apply weakness and shock, even though it says weakness and cursed. So this allows you to get a shocked buff, which is electrical damage buff for Immortal Offering, which is good when you're mapping, because you're not really going to have it up on bosses most of the time, but you will have it up when you're mapping and going through packs and stuff, killing Untainteds. So it's a pretty sizable increase. We can get that bonus, so that's why I like having this. So you take the area effect, you take the free shock. The heal is nice. Let me take some damage here. It heals you for about, at 100,000 health, it heals me for about like half of my health, so like 50,000. I don't know if that's percentage based or if it's flat, but is a sizable chunk. It's way better than health potion. Just use it, and it's just a nice defensive thing to have. Grants resistance for each enemy hit. Again, like Bulwark of the Dawn. It's a pretty small buff, but this one stacks. So you jump to a pack, there's 10 mobs, you'll get 10 stacks of it. I believe 10 is the far as it stacks, but even if you use it on a boss, you're still going to get a minor bonus. So, you know, it's pretty good for 1 point. I like this one for 2 reasons. It increases the cooldown, which is not why I like it, but there's something you have to deal with. It gives you a 100% stun chance. So when you're jumping into a pack of mobs, they're going to be stunned 100% of the time. And then you can sit there and you can apply your other stuff while they're stunned. And once you've got your anomalies down, they're going to be CC locked. Even if you just have like one anomaly down, they're continuous. They're going to be like running towards you and bouncing back. So it gives you like breathing room. Also, when you're against a boss, if they're not unstoppable, they'll have a like a break bar, and the stun is going to any CC you do is going to impact the break bar. So like Anomaly is really good at breaking the bar. Also, Lightbringer does a sizable chunk of damage to the bar because you're having that 100% stun chance, so that hurts the bar. So that's why I'm using this. There's tons of other ones you can use. I'll have the Wolcen universe write up, link to the description below, but that's basically it for those. And now I'm going to go through the passive tree real quick. This is what the passive tree looks like right now for me. I am currently level 76, which is not too hard to get. I know some of the builds have like level 90 or stuff, but 70 like plus isn't too hard. Like you're gonna hit 70 pretty quickly, and then the levels start to slow down. But you can like mix and match points based on what you have and based on how many points you have. So this is what it looks like. I'll have the whole thing up on Wolcen Universe, but let me go through it real quick. Just reset it here and show you how you'd level up here. So you have to spin some of the wheels around. You're going to want Soldier here, Kabbalist here, and like Plaguebringer there. We're not going into Plaguebringer, but it's just this is how you set them up. So we're going to start off and we're going to go through all the crit damage. Crit damage is going to multiply your damage, and it's very good to get any source of critical damage percentage that you can. So we're going to come right here, get this crit chance score. Now getting this crit chance score, let's confirm this here, is going to let us do full toughness. So I have a lot of ferocity. That's because I run bruiser gear that I'll show in the gear video. So most of the ferocity is from gear and stuff. This is going to help. This, along with some other stuff we're going to take, is going to allow you to get enough crit chance to justify going 100% toughness. When you're leveling up, you can do like a split between ferocity and toughness, just to make sure you have enough crit chance where you're still going to be critting enough and enough survivability. But later on, when you get a ton of bruiser gear, ton of other stuff in the tree, go ahead and dump it all in toughness. You're going to have plenty of crit chance. So we're going to take every single crit damage thing here. Just go right through all of them. And then we're going to come through here. Kabbalist, we want go through both of these, so it makes sense to just go through Kabbalist because we're going to want to take this anyways. Come right up here, take a Mortal Offering. This is what I was talking about earlier with the shock thing. When you kill an enemy, you get 5% of damage per stack, so 25%, assuming they have full stacks, or at least 5 stacks, as a flat damage buff based on your damage. So this is going to be a huge chunk of damage, especially when you're mapping, because that's when you have it up most, because you'll be killing mobs all the time and refreshing the buff. When you refresh the buff, it'll add on to itself. So if you have the buff, you have 2 stacks, you kill a mob, say it only has 1 stack, it'll go up to 3 stacks as opposed to going back down to 1. So you can keep it at 5 stacks pretty much all the time. And on Act bosses, I'm not sure about Act 1, but I know Act 2 and 3 have a ton of mobs, so you can keep this up pretty consistently on the story bosses. For map bosses, not so much. Sometimes they'll only have like 2 mobs, or they'll be like mobs you want to ignore, or just like mobs that aren't worth killing. So it's not going to be as much on map bosses, but you can still kill the map bosses fine. It's going to be a huge bonus to your damage while you're leveling and mapping. When you're leveling, you're going to want to come through here. Later on, you want to take this out and then go through this way, because I like taking this node, and it's much better to go through an all resistance score than it is to go through movement speed. But when you're leveling, you're going to want the movement speed, so come through the movement speed here. Come right up here, wisdom's fine, flat stats are always good, and you're going to want the +1 ailments. This is going to allow everything to apply more than 1 ailment, and it's going to make sure Immortal Offering basically rolls much faster on everything, because you don't have to rely on specific damage types as much, because everything's going to be applying 2 stacks of stuff. So you should be able to keep all 3 of your occult damage bonuses up pretty consistently. Next we're going to come over here, Come right over to EOS, get some spell damage, sacred damage, and I like going through the plus 10% healing just because this is a pretty unique node. You're not going to get this anywhere else in the tree for the most part. You can go through the sacred damage, but it's a small bonus, and you typically want sacred damage to be your smallest damage type because weakness isn't as important as getting cursed and stasis on things. So I like coming through the healing here, and then you're going to want Dawn Spear Striker and Sudden Death. This basically gives you Calling Strike if you play PoE. If you haven't, it's like an Execute. When they're below 15% of their health, this applies to map bosses, any type of mobs when you take the sub node. Does not apply to the act bosses, so like the story bosses, but it'll apply to any of the like mobs they summon, so it's still worth having for those. Um, any form of sacred damage will kill them. You can get one piece of sacred damage, 2 spells anywhere on your gear, and then all of your spells will execute. That's currently how this node works. If they change that to be only like sacred type spells, we have plenty of sacred type spells, so that's not an issue there either. Next, we're to come right through here. I like taking this early. Slipping Shadow. It makes it so your active dodge, which is the spacebar roll, goes through enemies. Earlier on, it doesn't go through enemies, and it's just terrible. It feels bad. You take this, all of a sudden, you have this brand new defensive thing that you can use all the time. It's great. Next, we're going to come right through here, take all the occult damage, and then take Occult Affliction on the sub node. This will give you 5 for this, 2 for this, so 7% increased occult damage for every curse stack an enemy has. Now, it says from your attacks, but that's just like the flavor text. The little node thing below it is what it actually does. So some of these have flavor text, like this one has like enemies are killed, and then it tells you what it does, which is dealing sacred damage, kills enemies below. Yeah. So the actual damage text is what you want to look at. So currently you start off with 10 stacks, so this gives you 70% increased damage. Now this is a flat damage percentage increase, like these, so it's not going to be as beneficial as like a crit multiplier or like a flat damage 2 spells is going to be, but it's such a high number, especially when we get more stacks, that it's definitely worth shooting for. So after you take this, you're dealing 70% increased damage to an enemy with full curse stacks. You're going to want to jump back over here and get 10 more curse stacks. And that's going to make it so that enemies that have now 20, which is your max curse stacks, are going to be taking 140% increased occult damage, which is basically all of your damage is occult damage. So you have a very, very sizable increase in damage, especially earlier on when you don't have too many damage multipliers. The earlier ones you get are pretty good, even if it's just doing like a flat percentage. Next, we're going to come over here, get nice crit damage here. I like this as a defensive option. This basically allows you to block with any weapon, even if you're not wearing a piece of heavy armor, because heavy armor has the exact same effect that this does. And every weapon has an inherent block chance. So this will be 6% plus the weapon's inherent block chance. So usually you'll have around 10, 12-ish% block chance when you first take this. And then I like coming down here. Blocks inflicts weakness in an AoE. This is nice, but you do plenty of sacred damage. Applying weakness is not going to be a problem. This is better on builds that aren't using occult damage. But the reason we're coming this here when you're leveling is to get 5% block chance, and then come over here get 3% block chance. And now we have 14% block chance between these 3 nodes, which that coupled with your weapon's base block chance, coupled with a few block chance gems in your gear, should be more than enough to have you blocking like 40% of the time or so. And then take the block efficiency just to give you some more damage protection when you're blocking. So this is all defensive stuff here. And we're going to come back down over here, and we're going to hit Time Weaver. Now, if you've seen any Wolcen builds, Time Weaver is a big part of most of them, just because of how good it is offensively and defensively. Time Weaver is an Aether-based tree. Luckily, we do a good chunk of Aether damage. So a bunch of these nodes are beneficial for us, and we don't have to go out of our way to put stasis on things. I like coming through this node as opposed to going down through the Aether damage, because the Aether damage is it's a very minor bonus, because it's to one damage type and it's a flat percentage. And this saves you a point on the tree, even though this basically does nothing. So I think the extra point is definitely worth like losing out on some minor bonuses. So we're going to come over here. Which time cannot heal in the sub node? this is effectively going to double the damage your hit steal over time. So you're not going to see bigger numbers, but a tick 1.5 seconds after your stuff deals damage, it's going to deal the same amount of damage again, on top of the stuff it's already doing. So this is effectively a damage doubler for like damage over time, um, not for like ailments because we're not dealing ailments, but like hits on the ground. So like the anomaly ticks, the solar flare ticks, all the ticks will be doubled, and then this just adds another 20 damage to that. So they're not doubled, they're 120%, so a little more than doubled. And then coming through here, max ailment stacks, dire juncture. This is going to make it so you're not going to get one shot. You're only ever going to take 60% of a hit. So the first 40 you're going to take when they hit you. After 1 second, which is less than most of the ticks, you're going to take another 60%. It reduces your maximum health and maximum force shield, and you can take this behind it, which is going to be your biggest health increasing node, because it increases your health maximum. So this is between these two, you're going to have 90% of your max health, which isn't too bad when you're not getting one shot anymore. So the downside here really isn't there. And then finally, we're going to take the last ailment stack here. So this puts you at 30 ailment stacks, which means you're dealing 210% increased occult damage to a fully cursed enemy, which is, even though it's a flat percentage, that is a ton of flat percentage. So definitely want to make sure you have your curse stacks up on stuff. Finally, we're going to come through here, come over to Exorcist. Most of these nodes are crap. This one has movement speed, so that's useful. This one has crit chance. You usually have enough crit chance, so I like coming through here because you get bonus health and material resistance score, so it's two things that are actually beneficial. So I just like going right through here. And we're going to get our 10 points. So 10 points is a wheel of 5, and between you get 15% reduced, and you take this, they turn it to 20. So the first time you take damage, it's going to be 20 times 5, so that's 100% reduced damage. So your first hit, just ignore that. You don't take damage. The beauty of this is it doesn't pop all of them, it just pops the first one. So your first hit, no damage. Second hit, you're going to take 80% reduced damage. Third hit, you're going to take 60% reduced damage. So when you're in a big pack of mobs, this is going to go down pretty quick and it's not going to refresh. So not very helpful for like doing big packs of mobs. But when you're doing like a map boss or something, or it's like one big mob you're fighting, you can jump around with Aether Jump, Active Dodges, the Lightbringer, and you can dodge a few hits and make sure that the tenant points start stacking up again, and that gives you like a damage decrease on the next hit if you've dodged for a little bit. So now we basically are not going to get one shot between these two, and we have a sizable increase with 30 Curse Stacks and Occult Affliction, and we have Culling Strike. So what we're going to do now is I like coming over here, and if you want, you can come this way to get your all resistances and the double ailment stacks. And the double ailment stacks is, you don't need to take the other ones, 50% is more than enough because we're just relying on sheer hits to apply ailment stacks. But I like coming through this because it's a nice quality of life to get your curse stacks up faster, especially on like smaller mobs where they're not going to live as long. It just makes it faster, deal more damage, and the all resistance is an excellent node. And then you can unallocate this one, so you're coming through the tree this way, so you'd have to respec. So you come through this way, and then we're going to go over here, and if you feel like you need more damage, go ahead and take this note. It's 4% for each nearby enemy. So against a boss, it's going to be like usually just 4% damage, or if they have some mobs, it'll be like 12% maybe at most. Against packs, you have like 10, 20. It very quickly becomes a huge amount of damage when you're doing a big death fall. So I like just taking the one here. No need to take any of the other ones. You're good to go. If you don't have any leech, you can go ahead and take this here. You want one source of leech on your gear. If you get leech on your staff, you don't need to take these nodes. Ferocity and leech are both great nodes, but if you have leech, you can save the points. If you have like sacred damage leech or shadow damage leech from like a crafting thing on one of your pieces of armor, and you feel like it's enough leech for you, where you're not dying and you're healing up constantly, don't need to take these two nodes. If you have no leech, I currently don't have any leech in my gear, go ahead and take these. Next, we're going to come up here. All this is health. This whole tree is excellent. Siegebreaker is a great defensive and offensive tree, in my opinion. So when you get this one, what you can do is you can actually save this respec for here if you want to save your primordial affinity. So once you reach this point, you can respec out of all the block chance here. So take this out, take the weakness out, take the 3% block chance out of here. I like leaving this just because block efficiency is a nice thing to have. This is optional at this point, but I just like having it. And with the 3 points you got from 1, 2, 3, you could just go block efficiency, all resistances, belligerent banner. The way this works is it'll give you a wheel of 10. Each point gives you 4% block chance. That's 40 block chance. Every time you block, all the points get wiped, unlike your 10 of points. This works fine because basically it's going to keep building up until a hit rolls a block against you. So when a hit rolls and it lands on a block, then you block, you reduce the damage, and then it resets. And because block is like, it's not a sure thing with this build, we're not aiming for like 100% block chance. We don't use a shield. It's not really viable. It's just another form of protection. You can just take this. You don't need the one below it. Just take this, and this is more than enough block chance that you're going to need for your purposes. You can take all of the block chance gems out of your gear at this point. You don't need them. I'm currently running block efficiency gems, but they only add about like 1.5% block efficiency, so it's not like necessarily the best defensive thing. You can put in all resist, you can put in more health. I'll go over more of that in the gearing thing, but basically just as long as your defensive gems make it feel like you're not dying, you should be fine. And as long as you have leech and these two nodes, you should be fine. Now we're finally going to get a huge truck ton of resistances. We come over here, block efficiency, all resists, salvatory anchor. This is what forces you basically to run heavy armor, and the one below it is what forces you to run a heavy helm. Luckily, our best in slot helm is a heavy helm, so we benefit from that, like, no matter what. But this is going to give you triple the amount of resistances on your armor, and you can roll very high armor. Usually, the highest rolls are around 1,000 plus. It's like 100% increased all resistances and 220 flat all resistances increase is the highest possible you can get, and then increase the quality of it all the way so that the natural resist roll gets the highest, and that's the highest you can get on that. But this is going to give you a tremendous amount. This is why I have like 11,000 resistances. So between that and the helm, if you find a good helm that is not heavy and you have spare primary affinity, you can allocate this one. Because it's really not worth it unless you have a heavy one, or a dodge one, but we're not a dodge focused build, so it doesn't matter too much. So I'd take those. Finally, I would you can go in through here for disaligning vessel and stuff, but what I would first do is go grab some quality of life stuff. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab max willpower rage, max willpower rage, max willpower rage, and now that we have 1400. Feel free to take Raining in the Darkness. This is going to give you a ton of crit chance. 100% isn't doubled, but it's like 100% on top of what you have. So it usually adds up to like anywhere from 5 to 10% crit chance, like flat the number. So this is a very sizable increase, and it's pretty easy once you have a good chunk of willpower and rage between 2 willpower flasks and infinity blades to keep it up. Then I would come down here. All resists, willpower cost decrease. All resists, willpower cost decrease. 150 max willpower rage. This puts you at 1550. This is pretty much as far as you're going to get in max willpower rage. The other one's over here. And shadow damage max willpower rage is fine. You could maybe think about something this around like when you're getting upper 80s, 90s. I'm not close to there. I don't think I'm going to get there anytime soon. But like this is fine because you have casting speed, stamina point, willpower rage, and then you get the extra stamina point if you want. So this is a fine 3-pointer if you want to get more later on, but for the most part, this is where you're going to stop. And we've got 2 points left. So what I did after this, and what I'm currently doing, is you come in through the crit damage, and you take Disallowing Vessel. And this is, you reduces your movement speed, so you want to make sure you have a good pair of boots with movement speed on them first before you take this. And it gives you, at max stacks, it's going to give you 60% increased damage, which is the flat percentage, so not much, but everything adds up. And when you take the node behind it, which I'll show you how I did in a second, is you're going to get 10% all resistances per point, so you're going to get 100% all resistances, which is just another addition on top of your flat percentage increases for your resistances. And the health regen, they nerfed a lot. You're not taking it for that. You have Bulwark of the Dawn. You don't need regen. So what I did to like pull out the extra points is uh, I took this point out, 50% block efficiency, just came here through the 20. And then I took the block efficiency out here to get the one back here. So this is my current setup with what I am running with. You have all the nodes you really need. I've got leech. I've got a ton of damage. I've got a ton of resists. I've got tons of block. I've got execute, active dodge, tons of crit, 15, 1550 willpower, some willpower cost reduction throughout the tree. This is basically everything you could want. So that's my tree, and hopefully this video wasn't too long. And the next ones are going to cover, like I said before, gearing, how to gear, gems and stuff, and then the other one's just going to be a quick like run through and untainted.